Hey folks, it's Chris with the Human Project Podcast. I'm excited about this episode because we're going to continue our Christianese phrases. And one that we're going to talk about is the phrase, God is in control. Where is this helpful? Where is it not helpful? And let's talk about how we can help build the revelation of truth behind this phrase without just papering over something and walking away. So take a listen. Let us know what you think. Hello, Mark.
Hello, Chris.
How are you doing today?
Really good. How about you?
I'm also doing really good. I'm excited for this episode because we're going to continue our theme of Christianese phrases.
Okay.
And one that gets thrown around a lot, and I think gets thrown around loosely, that I'd like for us to dissect, talk about where it's good, where it's not so good, and the truth that's involved in it, because it definitely has a lot of truth packed into it, is the phrase, God is in control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very popular song back in the, I think it was 90s or 2000s.
Oh, yeah.
Like that.
Who was it that sang that?
Twyla Paris.
Twyla Paris.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's a throwback to...
You're welcome. It's in everybody's head who's
Christian
ever heard
culture.
it now. And other people going, what is that?
God is in control. Yep.
Right. Now we got to pay the licensing fee now that you sung it.
Technically I sang it off key.
Oh, we don't
they
even
start
recognize the
singing.
song. It's all good.
You can't own that phrase.
You just sang it.
I happened to string my vocal cords together in a certain way. At what point is it copyrighted? Because you can't, like, if it's a single tone, you can't do it. If it's multi-tone, like if it's just two tones, can you copyright it?
You just did like 5.
God.
At some point, we're going to talk about God is in control and not just the song. But we'll get there.
All right.
Hang with us.
Twyla Paris song. But it gets thrown around a lot. And like I said, there's a ton of truth in it.
Yeah.
Because God is in control. And there's this beautiful mystery of how God is sovereign and in control at the same time that we have freedom, and how those reconcile together is far beyond the scope of what we're going to cover in this podcast.
I had totally been studying up on that. Okay.
Just kidding. Stay tuned, folks. We're going to cover 600 hours of debates from thousands of years of theology.
Right. But we'll resolve it. It'll be perfectly clear and tell you exactly what's going on there.
Yeah. But I think we don't often use that phrase like as a theology phrase. That's not what we mean most of the time when we say that. The common times I see it brought up is somebody's going through something and you're like, well, God's in control, or God's got a reason. And I think that is a disservice, because I think in those moments, we're not actually reminding somebody of the fact that God is in control. I think what we're doing is papering over, bumper stickering. I'm seeing that as a common theme of a lot of these phrases that we bring up. It's just a bumper sticker of, I have no idea what else to say, so I'm just going to say some trite phrase and move away.
So kind of like, none of us can truly understand the mind of God, which is true, by the way, also. But none of us can understand the mind of God. Whatever you're going through, sorry about that. God knows what he's up to, so they're there.
God's got a reason. His ways are not our ways. All of the other ones that you
Better now?
can paper. Yeah, exactly. Cool. I did my duty as a Christian.
Right.
Way to go, me.
Ching.
Toodaloo. I don't know. Do you see it in that context often?
I'm trying to think of the times I don't hear it much, actually.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I don't hear it much. But when I do hear it, yes, it is more along the lines of papering over, bumper sticker, trying to give a simplistic answer instead of being uncomfortably trying to be with the person in whatever their situation is.
Yeah.
It is brought up more in that context. Yeah. And I maybe unhealthily, I've refused to say it because in the times that it's been said to me, it's been extremely unhelpful to me and distracting.
Yeah. Another way that we have talked about it before on the podcast is Romans 8:28ing somebody, for we know that all things work together for good for those that are called according to his purpose.
Right.
Yeah. And I think it's true.
Yeah.
True. God is completely sovereign and completely love, and those give us freedom and confidence and hope.
Yeah.
Because we are not helpless. God is not helpless. So we know that things that are happening for our good, some way, shape, or form. How that all reconciles, we don't know. Yeah. Tim Keller has a great book on this called Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. It dives really deep into the nuances and all of that, and also does a great job at talking about how other cultures and other religions around the world view suffering. And I think the danger that we have with this is exactly like what you said. We don't pull ourselves into the situation with somebody, but it's a wall, a barrier that we put up to say, well, God's in control. Don't I'm not in control. Don't bother me with this situation.
Yeah. Like hands off.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk away from this. And what's the implication to the person you're talking to in that situation too? Like if we're talking and you're going through something really rough and I just say like, oh, well, God's in control. Like what is it? Where does that leave you?
It's like, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
just hold your breath.
Yeah. Just plow through it, manage your way through it, wait. Like, and I think some of those things can be true and sometimes that is needed. But I think the percentage of time that it's needed versus the frequency at which it's said is far, 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 far less. So what I'd like to talk about is when it is a good thing to say.
I first of all avoid the phrase, like I've said already, just because to me it kind of triggers some of the same stuff we're talking about here. Yeah. When I would want to say it, it tends to sound for me something more like God's going to accomplish what he is setting out to accomplish. Because to me, that's like the essence of what I would typically be trying to say in that.
Yeah.
Whatever he's trying to accomplish in this, that he said he's going to do what he's going to set out to do. So we know that that's true. And it also acknowledges that I don't understand exactly what he's up to at this point in time.
Right.
So I think it's worth looking at it in that way to say like, I don't think God has a problem with us looking at him going like, what are you up to?
Yeah.
What's going on here? I don't understand this.
Yeah. Go all the way back to the genuineness and faith episode.
Right.
Like he welcomes that.
Yes, exactly. Vigorous dialogue partner and all of those good things. So I don't think the question, or the concept is off limits per se. But when I might say that to somebody else, that might be how it would go. I'll be honest, what I would rather do is for me to challenge myself with that. I want to remind myself of those things when I'm in the midst of something challenging. It's like God will accomplish what he's setting out to accomplish.
Yeah.
And then I can rest my faith, my confidence in that while I'm also going through this, because otherwise it's almost like God said, this is going to be tough. I'll be back in a couple years. You'll, and check in on you. Like it kind of has that feel to it, especially when me, back to that, you and me having a conversation, when I would just say to you like, oh, hey, God's in control. And then I leave. Yeah. Like it's got that same feel to it. Yep. And instead God's going, yes, I will accomplish what I'm setting out to accomplish. I know it's not clear to you what that is right now. Let's walk through this together. Yeah. It's a very different type of perspective on God is in control.
Yeah, I really like that replacement phrase. I think before we even get to saying a phrase like that or something similar, I think we need to understand what the person is going through. Yeah. Like be with them, be understanding of what's going on, be curious, like let them be able to talk and reflect and all of the good practices that we talk about. Yeah. But it comes from a spot of care and not a spot of don't involve me. Like, here you go. Here's the Bible verse or just a general concept. And I think where it's most helpful, I love the fact that you referenced like talking back to ourselves. I think that's where it's most helpful as opposed to somebody reminding us. Like we need to be reminding ourselves of that. But there are times that somebody needs to be reminded of that. And I think the most helpful time when that happens is when somebody is feeling hopeless. Like it's not just, oh, this is difficult. Oh, this is hard. I don't know what to do. But it is a deep sense of hopelessness. Like maybe that God has abandoned them.
Right. Yeah.
Like, and they really do need to be lifted up and reminded of that. And our part is to help them see that. Yeah. Not just throw the phrase at them, but get them to a spot where they are wanting to find a way out. Yeah. Wanting to see what truth is, because that's where truth ultimately comes into play.
Right. It's a beautiful thing of freedom to me too, in situations like that, when I realize that my responsibility in that situation is to invite the person to God.
Yeah. That's a very good way to put it.
I'm not there to convince them that God's good, that God is in control and will accomplish what he's going to accomplish. That might be what God asked me to say. I'm not saying that, but like my responsibility is as their brother or sister in Christ is to remind them, God, let's turn to God.
Yeah.
Because if they turn to God and have that vigorous dialogue with him, and we see example after example of it in the Bible. Job, you rethink about Job for a minute, right? He had vigorous dialogue with God.
Yeah.
And he was willing to be corrected, and he was. That's not necessarily a smackdown from God.
Yeah.
That's God saying,
God reminding him of who he is.
remember who I am. And Job going, oh, right.
Yeah.
Or I was just reading Habakkuk by the recommendation of somebody at our church. Wonderful short book where Habakkuk basically does a complaint, but it's like a lament psalm, except you get to see the conversation with God in it.
Yeah.
Where he goes, this isn't right. And God says, this is what I'm up to.
Yeah.
And he goes, this is not, how could you possibly ally with our enemies to fulfill your purposes? That's not who you are, God. And then what does he say? He says, I'm going to stand on the wall as a watchman and wait for God to rebuke me. Like, this is somebody who wants to hear from God. And when we or the people that we are with can get into that posture, give our complaint to God, he's not going to be offended by it. And then say, I'm ready to hear whatever you have to say to me. I don't need to be like making sure something happens at that point. That's God, and he will show he is faithful. He will remind us that he will fulfill his purposes, because that is what will happen.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful way of viewing it. So to summarize, helpful phrase?
I don't personally find it a helpful
Not
phrase,
so much.
no.
True phrase?
It is accurate, yes.
Say it to ourselves?
Yes.
Yes. Say it to others?
I like to rephrase it.
Maybe rephrase it
And not
after
as a
getting
lead.
to a certain spot
Yeah.
for the purpose of helping people see who God is.
Don't lead with it. I would not recommend that.
Yeah. Don't bumper sticker it.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks for exploring that, my friend.
Yeah.
Hey folks, thanks for tuning in today. Our team is made up of myself, Chris Conlin, and Mark Wavle, and our lead editor is Derek Donley. We're a crowd-funded nonprofit. Our free resources exist because of your generous support. To learn more about us or to check out the classes that we talk about here, visit us at www.humanproject.us. Thanks for joining us on our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to the fullness of God's design.